The council chamber fell silent as the disturbing footage played, every alien eye transfixed by the harrowing scenes from the human colony. On New Hope, once a promising settlement, now teetered on the brink of collapse, its life support systems crumbling under constant strain. Chief Engineer Benjamin Richardson worked around the clock, fighting a losing battle against dwindling resources and failing equipment. As part of the Council's annual assessment of primitive species, Councillor Deneb presented his anthropological report on the humans of New Hope. The Krenim scientists' holographic display painted a grim picture of the colony's dire situation. But what shocked the gathered councillors was the revelation of the humans' perplexing behavior. Deneb's video showed parents like Benjamin routinely sacrificing their own sustenance to keep their children alive. The engineer, gaunt and weary, handed his son Caleb his only protein bar, ignoring the hunger gnawing at his own body. Other colonists toiled late into the night, patching threadbare clothes, fashioning toys from scrap, and building ramshackle playgrounds in the dust. Such actions defy evolutionary logic, Deneb explained. Mature individuals should prioritize their own survival to reproduce again, not risk themselves for juvenile offspring. The council erupted into heated debate. Some argued this tendency revealed humanity's aggressive, expansionist nature. Parents selflessly producing and providing for offspring would fuel rapid population growth and the seizure of new worlds. Others saw it as a critical weakness, emotions undermining the cold rationality needed for an advanced civilization. Amidst the arguing voices, the council took a fateful vote to send a covert mission to New Hope and test the humans' resolve. Deneb volunteered to lead the expedition, vowing to engineer a crisis that would push the colonists to their limits. The fate of New Hope and humanity's future now hung in the balance. Zoran's hands moved deftly as he worked alongside Benjamin, the two men elbow-deep in the guts of the colony's failing life support system. Sparks flew from frayed wires, the acrid stench of burnt insulation filling the cramped maintenance shaft. Benjamin wiped the sweat from his brow with a grease-stained sleeve, his hollow eyes fixed on the task at hand. "Reroute power from the auxiliary generator," Benjamin instructed, his voice strained. "We need to buy time for the repair crews in sectors B and C." Zoran nodded, his fingers flying across the control panel. He marveled at the humans' unwavering focus, even as the weight of the colony's fate bore down on them. The temperature dropped noticeably as they labored, a chill seeping into their bones. In the dimly lit medbay, Dr. Lisa Chen triaged the influx of patients, prioritizing the children. She soothed frightened toddlers with soft words and gentle touches, ignoring the fatigue that clouded her vision. Parents hovered nearby, their faces etched with worry. Lisa met their eyes with a reassuring smile, even as her own heart raced with fear. At the hydroponics bay, Ethan Kowalski made the gut-wrenching decision to cut off water to the adult crops. He turned the valves with trembling hands, redirecting the precious resource to the children's section. The sight of withered leaves and stunted fruits tore at his soul, but he pushed aside his own hunger, knowing his children's survival depended on this sacrifice. In the makeshift classroom, Michael Nguyen led the children in a rousing rendition of Old MacDonald, their small voices rising above the hum of the failing life support. He clapped his hands, encouraging them to sing louder, desperate to drown out the sounds of the colony's impending collapse. The children's eyes shone with trust, their innocence a fragile light in the gathering darkness. Maria Rivera, her fingers raw from hours of stitching, distributed the last of the insulated clothing to the shivering children. She pulled a young girl close, wrapping a coat around her thin shoulders. The child's grateful smile was a balm to Maria's aching heart. She glanced at the adults, their clothes threadbare and inadequate against the biting cold, and silently prayed that their sacrifices would be enough. Caleb Richardson, his face smudged with grease, crawled through a narrow duct, a bundle of scavenged wires clutched in his fist. At 14, he was no longer a child, but a vital part of the colony's struggle for survival. He emerged in the control room, handing the precious wires to his father. Benjamin's eyes shone with pride as he watched his son work, a flicker of hope in the despair. Zoran observed it all, his cranium heart swelling with a strange mix of admiration and unease. These humans, so primitive and emotional, displayed a resilience he had never encountered before. Their irrational bonds, the very weakness he had come to exploit, now stood as their greatest strength. But even as he marveled at their tenacity, Zoran's hand hovered over the control panel, the computer virus loaded and ready to strike. With a single keystroke, he could sever the colony's last lifeline, unleashing a final devastating blow. His duty to the Galactic Council warred with the growing doubt in his mind. As the life support system sputtered and the temperatures plunged, Zoran faced a choice that would define not only the fate of New Hope, but the future of humanity itself. The weight of that decision settled on his shoulders, a burden he had never expected to bear. In the flickering light of the failing colony, Zoran stood at the precipice of a new understanding, one that would challenge everything he had ever believed. Zoran's finger hovered over the control panel, the virus poised to strike. But as he watched Benjamin's determined face, something shifted within him. He pulled his hand back, the weight of his mission suddenly unbearable. "Benjamin," Zoran said, his voice catching, "I need to tell you something." But before he could continue, a violent tremor shook the maintenance shaft. Sparks erupted from the console, and Benjamin cried out in pain as electricity arced through his body. He collapsed to the floor, smoke rising from his singed clothes. "No!" Zoran shouted, rushing to Benjamin's side. The human's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, and filled with pain. "Zoran," Benjamin gasped, "you have to finish the repairs. The colony depends on it." Zoran's hands shook as he tried to assess Benjamin's injuries. "I don't know how," he admitted, his Krenim knowledge useless in the face of human technology. Benjamin's breath came in ragged gasps. "I'll talk you through it, but first, promise me something." His eyes locked onto Zoran's, suddenly clear and intense. "Promise you'll look after Caleb. He's going to need guidance." Zoran nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "I promise." For the next hour, Benjamin's failing voice guided Zoran through a complex series of repairs. Zoran worked frantically, his alien fingers learning to manipulate human tools with increasing dexterity. As the last connection clicked into place, the hum of machinery filled the air. Benjamin smiled weakly. "You did it," he whispered. Then his eyes closed and he was gone. Zoran sat in stunned silence, the reality of what had happened crashing over him. The sound of approaching footsteps snapped him back to attention. He quickly adjusted his appearance, ensuring his alien features were hidden. Caleb burst into the room, his face streaked with grime and sweat. "Dad!" he cried, rushing to Benjamin's side. Zoran stepped back, watching as the boy's hope turned to anguish. In the days that followed, New Hope seemed to teeter on the brink of collapse. Zoran watched as Caleb, eyes red-rimmed but determined, rallied the other children. They formed work crews, tackling repairs, and tending to the youngest colonists with a efficiency that belied their years. In the medbay, Dr. Lisa Chen collapsed while treating a patient. Her daughter May, barely tall enough to reach the medical supplies, took charge with a calm authority that left Zoran in awe. As food stores dwindled and tempers flared, a man named Hawkins began to argue for abandonment. "We have shuttles," he shouted to a gathered crowd. "We should use them while we still can." The colonists erupted into heated debate. Zoran hung back, his alien perspective giving him a unique vantage point on the human drama unfolding before him. Suddenly, Maria Richardson stepped forward. Her voice, though quieter than Hawkins, carried a strength that silenced the crowd. "Look at our children," she said, gesturing to where Caleb and his friends were comforting a group of younger kids. "They are the future of humanity. If we abandon New Hope, we abandon everything we've built here, everything we've sacrificed for." Her words seemed to ripple through the colonists. Zoran watched as faces hardened with tenacity, shoulders straightened, and hands reached out to clasp those of neighbors. In that moment, Zoran knew he could no longer view these humans as mere test subjects. Their resilience, their devotion to each other, spoke of something greater than simple evolutionary instinct. He slipped away from the crowd, his mind racing. He had to find a way to help without revealing his true nature. As he worked through the night, applying his advanced knowledge to the colony's systems, Zoran grappled with the implications of his actions. When the colonists awoke to functioning life support and the crackle of a restored communication system, their jubilation was tinged with confusion. How had this miracle occurred? Zoran watched from the shadows as Caleb addressed the colonists, his young face alight with a mixture of grief and willpower. The boy spoke of his father's legacy, of the need to push forward and rebuild. As the humans of New Hope began to pick up the pieces, Zoran made his decision. He would stay, honoring his promise to Benjamin and protecting these remarkable creatures. But as he looked to the stars, he knew that soon he would have to face the Galactic Council and somehow make them understand what he had learned about humanity. Zoran stood before the Galactic Council, his posture rigid and his voice steady as he delivered his report. The holographic displays flickered with images of New Hope's struggles and triumphs, casting an eerie blue glow across the alien faces of the assembled counselors. The humans of New Hope demonstrated remarkable resilience in the face of near-certain doom, Zoran said, his words echoing through the vast chamber. Despite my interference, they managed to restore life support and unite their community. Murmurs rippled through the audience as Zoran recounted the ingenuity of Benjamin Richardson and the pivotal role played by the colony's children, led by young Caleb. He described the makeshift repair crews, the resourcefulness of Dr. Chen's daughter in the medbay, and the unwavering purpose of parents sacrificing for their offspring. I must confess, Zoran continued, his voice lowering, I abandoned my mission. In Benjamin Richardson's final moments, I revealed my true nature to him. After witnessing their struggles, I could not bring myself to be the instrument of their destruction. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Councillor Deneb rose, his face contorted with anger. You contaminated the subjects. This experiment is now worthless. Others voiced their agreement, but a small faction remained silent, their expressions thoughtful. Councillor Lyra, her luminescent skin pulsing with curiosity, spoke up. Perhaps this contamination has given us even greater insight into the human psyche. Their ability to accept Zoran, an alien, into their fold speaks volumes about their adaptability. The debate raged for hours. Zoran stood firm, recounting how he had lent his expertise to the humans' rebuilding efforts. He spoke of Caleb's leadership, of Maria's impassioned speech that united the colony, and of the countless small acts of sacrifice that had ensured their survival. Their devotion to their young, Zoran concluded, may seem irrational by our standards, but it drives them to incredible feats of innovation and perseverance. It is not a weakness, but a strength that propels their species forward. The council entered a period of intense deliberation. When they emerged, their decision sent shockwaves through the gathered assembly. By a narrow majority, the head counselor announced, we have voted to extend an offer of uplift to the New Hope colony. We will grant them access to advanced resources and technology, allowing them to establish new worlds suited for human habitation. Even as celebrations broke out among some counselors, others voiced their concerns. We must proceed with caution, warned an elder member. Humanity's aggressive tendencies and high reproductive rates could pose a significant threat if left unchecked. As the council session adjourned, Zoran found himself approached by Counselor Lyra. You've taken quite a risk, Zoran, she said, her eyes glowing with interest. But you've also opened up a fascinating new chapter in our understanding of emerging species. I'd like you to continue your work with the humans of New Hope. Back on the colony, Caleb Richardson stood before a gathering of colonists, his father's tool belt hanging loosely around his waist. At 16, he carried himself with a gravity beyond his years, shaped by loss and responsibility. We've survived the impossible, Caleb said, his voice carrying across the attentive crowd. But survival isn't enough. We need to build something greater, a civilization that honors the sacrifices of those we've lost. Zoran watched from the sidelines, a surge of pride mingling with apprehension. He knew the weight of the secret he carried, the knowledge of the alien deliberations that could shape humanity's future. As Caleb outlined his vision for New Hope's future, emphasizing education, sustainable development, and preparation for expansion, Zoran recognized the seeds of a leader who could potentially guide humanity through the turbulent waters ahead. Later, as the two worked side by side repairing a malfunctioning atmospheric regulator, Zoran broached the subject carefully. Caleb, there's something I need to tell you about your father, and about myself. Caleb's hands stilled on the control panel, his eyes meeting Zoran's with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. What is it, Zoran? Zoran took a deep breath, knowing that his next words could change everything. The future of New Hope, and perhaps all of humanity, hung in the balance as he prepared to bridge the gap between two worlds. Zoran took a deep breath, knowing that his next words could change everything. The future of New Hope, and perhaps all of humanity, hung in the balance as he prepared to bridge the gap between two worlds. Caleb, Zoran began, his voice low and measured, your father discovered my true nature in his final moments. I am not human. I am a Crinim, sent by the Galactic Council to observe and test your colony. Caleb's eyes widened, his hands frozen on the control panel. For a moment, silence filled the cramped maintenance shaft. You're an alien? Caleb finally managed, his voice a mixture of disbelief and awe. Zoran nodded, his human disguise shimmering and fading away to reveal his true Crinim form. Caleb stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. I was sent to push your colony to its limits, to see if humanity was worthy of joining the galactic community, Zoran explained. But what I witnessed here changed everything. Your father's sacrifice, your resilience, the way your people came together. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Caleb's shock slowly gave way to a steely drive. Why are you telling me this now? Because the Galactic Council has made a decision about humanity's future, and you need to address the colony, Zoran replied. Hours later, Caleb stood before the gathered colonists of New Hope. The setting sun cast long shadows across the faces of those assembled, a mix of curiosity and apprehension evident in their expressions. My friends, Caleb began, his voice carrying across the crowd, we've endured more than any family should have to bear. But it was that endurance, that love for one another, for our children, that saw us through the darkest hours. As Caleb spoke, Zoran watched from the sidelines, marveling at the young man's poise. He saw echoes of Benjamin in Caleb's stance, in the way he commanded the attention of the colonists. Ben Richardson was the strongest, bravest human I've ever known, Caleb continued, his voice thick with emotion. And in his final moments, he asked me to lead us into the future he sacrificed everything for. A hushed silence fell over the crowd as Caleb paused, gathering himself. That future is now upon us. The aliens who tested our commitment were astonished by the lengths we parents went to shield our young. At this, Zoran stepped forward, revealing his true form to the stunned colonists. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Caleb raised a hand, silencing them. The Galactic Council has offered to uplift our colony, Zoran explained, his alien voice resonating across the gathering, to share our knowledge and technology and help you seed new worlds for future generations. The former Crinim agent's tone hardened as he continued. But they fear you. They worry your irrational love for your offspring will make you an unstoppable force if unleashed among the stars, a force they may no longer be able to control. As the implications of Zoran's words sank in, Caleb watched the faces of his people. He saw the hope, the fear, the purpose etched into every line and furrow. We have a choice to make, Caleb proclaimed, his voice ringing with conviction. We can accept the Council's help, but only if we temper the passion that makes us human. Only if we abandon the protective instincts that saved us on this world. Or, Caleb's gaze swept across the colony, the repair crews with their makeshift tools, the medics who had worked tirelessly through the crisis, the teachers watching over the wide-eyed children. Or we can blaze our own trail among the stars, he declared. No matter how harsh the void, no matter what alien worlds or civilizations we encounter, we'll cling to our humanity, our love, our willingness to sacrifice everything for those most precious, so that one day they may raise families of their own beneath new suns. The colony erupted in cheers and applause. Parents pulled their children close, their eyes shining with a mixture of pride and fierce protectiveness. As the noise died down, Caleb's voice cut through the evening air, charged with perseverance. The Council thinks our priority of protecting our children is a weakness. Then we'll make it our greatest strength. We'll show them just how far a parent's love can carry the human race." The response was deafening. Colonists embraced, tears streaming down faces weathered by hardship and hope. Zoran stood apart, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of admiration and trepidation. As the crowd began to disperse, already buzzing with plans and preparations, Caleb approached Zoran. The young leader's eyes burned with the same fire that had driven his father. "You've given us a choice," Caleb said, his voice low but firm. "Now I need you to make one. Are you with us, Zoran? Will you help us chart our own course among the stars?" Zoran looked at Caleb, then at the determined faces of the colonists behind him. He thought of the Galactic Council, of his duty, of the risks and possibilities that lay ahead. With a slow nod, he made his decision, knowing that the path forward would be fraught with challenges neither human nor Krenim could fully anticipate.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.